to have an hour.
Welcome back to Midday. We're joined now with Chief Ron Ignace and his wife, Marianne. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you
for having us. And you have done a long collaboration, which has culminated in this fantastic book, Secwepemc People, Land and Laws.
Right.
Thanks for joining us. We're very excited about this. You guys had a signing, I believe, at Chapters just a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
A bit of an introduction for Kamloops to the book.
And we're having another one this Saturday. We're request to come back by popular demand Saturday at 1 o'clock.
Fantastic. That's exactly what you want to hear after a book signing. Yeah, we want more.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the collaboration. How long have you worked together to put together this amazing work?
Well, it took us 10 years to actually produce the text, to write it, and all 600 plus dense pages of it.
Wow.
In terms of the time it took to research it, for me that goes back to late 1984, when I began research with Secwepemc elders, initially in Simch on the North Thompson, and then being asked and called upon to do further research in what became my home community, Skitchison, and really pretty much all 17 communities in our nation. And for Ron, I'll let him talk about it. I think outside of decades and decades of being raised in Secwepemc territory in our community, learning the language as a young child from his great-grandparents. He also completed a PhD on the way through.
Fantastic.
Yeah, well, I grew up listening to stories about our history and our people and our struggles for our land. I was raised by my great-great-grandmother. But I also really got into it when in the 70s, when I went to UBC and got my master's degree. And I had done research on the McKinnon-McBride Commission and got my MA, came home, and with the encouragement of Marianne here, went on to do my PhD, and in that process, through my doctoral thesis, I began researching and documenting our history, because I knew that our people were tenacious in front of all adversity and survival,
and we had a rich history,
rich history of great statesmen. Our leaders were great statesmen in the front of a colonial oppression, and yet they maintained that statesmanship. And I knew that our history has been distorted and marginalized, and I was wanting to demonstrate that we have a proud and glorious history that needs to be front and center on our territory in Secwepemc.
Yes, and to make it accessible for all people if we don't have the privilege of hearing the oral history and having that passed down by people who know, where do we go to find that out? So it's so great to have a resource for those of us who would like to know more about those origins.
Right, and we're hoping to reignite our young youth to re-engage back into our history, and as well as to have the opportunity to educate the non-native people about whose land that they're living on and benefiting from.
If there's one thing that you could think of, I mean, like you said, it's large and it's full of information, but if there's one thing in there that you think will surprise people, or people might not in general know, what's one good nugget that people will find in the book?
I'll say one and let's move on to Marianne.
I'm sure you each have one.
Yeah. Go ahead.
One of the things that came out during the research process is that the remembrance of history and existence on the land quite literally goes back to the end of the last ice age, 10,000 years ago, when the glaciers were melting, and people around the turn of the century, just over 100 years ago, told ethnographer James Tate at the time that their ancestors, through being handed down many generations, remembered how the glaciers melted.
Wow.
That was a time of great wind and fires, which we know from the environmental history it was like. And so that was the beginning of the unfolding. And I think of it too, once we to put the dots together on this. And how if we look at the landscape around us, right here at Kamloops, those marks in the landscape are still there. We can see those claw marks of the of that emerging landscape, and to know that human memory reaches back that long.
And the importance of that oral tradition and being passed down. Okay, quickly, what about for you, Ron?
Well, what people would not know, during in 1858, the American gold rush came up, and the American militia established themselves in the Fraser Canyon, planted the American flag, and then waged war against the Thompsons, and the Thompsons called us and the Okanogans together. We formed a coalition, and we fought against the Americans, and we fought them to a standstill, and we signed treaties of peace with the Americans.
Wow.
Otherwise, had we not done that, today,
we'd look very different.
No. You'd be calling Donald Trump your president, because they were looking to annex.
Yeah,
Yes.
we would all look very different, where our divisions are drawn, where the parameters are. Well, thank you so much for joining us. There's obviously so much in here that we all need to learn, and we would be better informed about where we live and our own history. Again, you guys are having another signing?
Yes.
Tomorrow.
At Chapters as well?
1 p.m. at Chapters.
1 p.m. at Chapters. All right. If you would like to meet the authors of this fantastic book and learn a little bit more, that's where you can find them. The book is also available at mquup.ca or chapters.ca. Thank you so much for joining us and for all of your hard and fantastic work. We will be a better educated society because of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back from our midday in just a moment.